Mm.
Kevin, could you talk us through some of the obstacles that businesses might face on the actual migration and how they can best prepare themselves for as little disruption as possible?
Yeah, that's a good, and I talked about not wanting to spend a lot of time in that interim state. And if you think about it, in a lot of organizations, as you rightly point out, Tom, they of course think about where they are, and of course then they make a pitch to where they want to go. And the thing is there's going to be this day when you're in the midpoint. And if you think about a larger organization, that means you have 50% of the people on the old system and 50% of the people on the new system. And that could be thousands of people on both, or even in some of these multinational cases that we work with, tens of thousands of people. And on that day, somebody, has to support both systems. There's probably people that are being onboarded and offboarded on both systems because, with different scenarios like boss admin and call control, like offices that are on the old system, when new people join that office, you have to put them on the new system. So, giving consideration to this midpoint, to, how are you going to scale up the teams and your tooling on this most complicated day when you're at this 50-50 is critically important because, what I like to say is like, if you don't get past the midpoint, you don't get to the end, right? You made the business case based on getting to the end, but you got to go through this, this very challenging day. Sometimes I have a slide that has two fish bowls and the fish between the bowls. And, that's the fish isn't really too happy, right? So I know that, one of the ways to do it is to use automation, right? Because to do it manual just means you're living this half, wave interim state for longer than probably the organization wants. Because let's face it, no large organization can do some flash cut. This isn't going to be an overnight or over weekend thing. So, Tim, I know we wanted to, have real world examples. So once again, maybe over to you to talk about some real world examples, how the tools can kind of speed you through this period.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, and but maybe talk a little about best practice on this topic. We've been in organisations, and they're at this midpoint. You're fully committed. You've got services on both platforms, and you're trying to navigate through that. And we've seen come into organisations with projects, and they've had a lot of this running on large spreadsheets, and we are talking a lot of data. If you think of a reasonable user population and that existing voice configuration sort of running on both sides, it gets complex. It's a big spreadsheet if it's inside there, and you're typically using highly skilled, technical people to try and keep a grip around this. So, in terms of best practice, what we'd suggest and what we put in the projects when we're running migration projects like this is we put tooling in, and the goal really is to provide an intuitive view where you can look across the users and the services and the configuration across the whole estate, and that's including both services where you're coming from and where you're going to on the Microsoft Teams side from quite a nice view, and you can take that out into business as usual with your service desk and where they're managing onboarding and offboarding and the like, and you can take that out into your stakeholder reporting. So that's what we put in. It's all about one view, making it intuitive and keeping a good handle with a foot in both camps so you can manage those services live as you're going through this midpoint and through this transition. And just in terms of some outcomes on that might be interesting to share, it keeps a good control around the whole project. Typically we'd look to take 50% out of the runtime on a migration project, with a good control panel around this. And that control panel and that view in there, it also keeps an accuracy on the project. So again, you get a lot less post-migration support issues on here, as people migrate across to the new platform. The niggles and the issues, it's really cut down, and that really drives user experience, and just a good adoption on the other side. So our saying on this best practices, you're only as good as your control panel on these migrations, and that's what we really recommend, on any size, reasonable size migration going through this midpoint.